Okay, students, so the last part of today's makeup assignment is looking at the goal setting chapter. And we have been doing self-assessments. We've been talking about academic and career goal exploration, and now it's time to look at actual goal setting. So, when you're making effective goals, reflect on the self-assessment stage of the goal discernment process. Make sure you're incorporating this knowledge. So, for instance, if you are very strong on um, the perceiving scale of Myers-Briggs, if you are someone who got as work value that you want something unstructured and not time dependent, then being a CPA, a certified public accountant, is probably not the right fit for you. Now, I'm not saying you can't do things that are outside of your preferences. So, for instance, I'm an introvert on a scale of Myers-Briggs, but at the same time, I do something that's very public and people related. But at the same time, it's not very far out of my comfort zone. And I was also very well aware of it when I was choosing my career. So I was incorporating the knowledge from the goal exploration stage as I'm setting my goals. It's good to write down your goals and also use things like I will statements as opposed to just nebulous, future focused statements. So, the book offers other suggestions for goal setting, such as prioritizing your goals, and it can be useful to set what's your kind of number one goal for the upcoming few weeks or months. At the same time, I wouldn't spend too much time prioritizing your goals because it's really not about what you number it's about whether or not you follow through on it. There's also some very interesting research about the difference between performance goals and outcome goals. So, for instance, an outcome goal that was studied once was throwing darts, and they had young women throw darts, and they picked women because they assumed that they wouldn't have thrown darts a lot, and they had them, and they offered three different scenarios. One group was not given any goals, and they were just told to throw these 15 darts at the board, and they performed the worst in terms of the score. The next group, they gave an outcome goal. So after they had thrown a few darts, they said, hey, for your next 5, try to get the highest score you can. And they did better than those who didn't have any goals, which supports the idea of writing down your goals. But then the third group, they said, don't focus on your score right now. What we want you to focus on is just making a very good release of the dart whenever you're throwing it. So focus on the motion of your hand whenever you're flicking that dart out of your hand. And those young ladies actually ended up performing the best out of all of the students. And there's this interesting paradox that by focusing on performance goals or the behavior, you actually do better than when you're focusing on just the outcome. And part of that is because the performance is what you have the most control over. You really don't have much control over the outcome. Lots of things can happen, but the performance and the closer it is to the behavior you can enact, the more effective and more control you have over it. So try writing performance goals as opposed to outcome goals, and we'll practice that later. And then make sure you're also anticipating obstacles so that if you know, for instance, that you've got a lot of tests coming up one week, don't set your goals to write the paper that week. You're going to need to anticipate obstacles. Also, you might need social support. You might know, for instance, that you're always really groggy in the morning and that's not a good time for you to study. So don't set a goal to get up early and study. Instead, focus on something that's more reasonable for you. And that goes along with this idea of quote unquote SMART goals. SMART goals are specific. They are specific things that you can engage in. They are also measurable. It's something that you can see the difference and whether you have or not have done it or not, and you can see that you're making progress towards it. They are also attainable. They are something that it is reasonable for you to work towards. And it's realistic in that it can happen within the time frame that you've set. And the most useful for me part is that they're time bound. It's not just uh, up in the air however long you're going to spend on it. So, for instance, if we look at a lot of people at New Year's, they tend to say that they're going to lose weight. Well, that's not a very specific goal. You can make it specific by saying you're going to lose 20 pounds this year. Now, losing weight is measurable, but it's not very specific still. So, but we'll say it's measurable. Attainable and realistic, these two kind of go together in that losing 20 pounds over a year is certainly attainable for a lot of people, while losing 20 pounds in 1 month is not very attainable, or it's certainly not in a healthy way. And then there's also realistic. So losing 20 pounds might be very realistic for some people if they're generally healthy. It might not be realistic if you're very sick or if you have a lot going on or something like that. So paying attention to what's realistic for you. And then finally, time bound. Instead of just saying you're going to lose weight this year, you can make it time bound by saying I'm going to lose 2 pounds a month, or I'm going to lose that 20 pounds by the end of the year. You're putting something, an end date on it, which gives you something to work forward to. And the last thing I want to talk about with goal setting, and this is not in your book, is the idea of taking a big goal and breaking it down into small pieces. Because as things are farther and farther away in time, they become less and less immediate for us to work on. And so, for instance, a lot of you are in school because you want a good job. Well, let's look at some intermediate goals that you can have. And so an intermediate goal is probably to get your bachelor's degree, and therefore, hopefully, after seeing last presentation, you'll see that graduating with an Associate of Arts or Associate of Science is probably a good intermediate goal. And as we know from the program of study, passing ACA 122 should be an intermediate goal because you cannot graduate with your AA or AS without completing this class. So those are all outcome-based goals. In order to make a nice, good process goal, I'm going to break that passing ACA down into a specific behavior that I can do, and I want to make sure it's a SMART goal. So the one I chose is check Blackboard 24 hours before class and ensure that I have completed the homework. So let's look at this. It's a process goal because it's focused on the behavior, checking Blackboard and completing homework, not on the outcome, passing ACA. It is specific because it's a clearly named behavior, checking Blackboard and completing homework, that's unambiguous, as opposed to something like study hard or work hard. That's not very specific at all. It's measurable because it's easy to see if it's completed or not. I can see if I've checked Blackboard. I can see if I've completed my homework. It is also attainable because it's something that is reasonable to assume I can complete. There's nothing that stops me from checking Blackboard and completing homework most of the time. And it's realistic because I know I've been able to do this in the past. And finally, you can see that it's time bound because there's a due date and a time for each class of 24 hours in advance. So this is what your makeup assignment in terms of your deliverable will be. Is in Blackboard, I have posted a quote unquote test for you to write a SMART goal and identify how it is a process goal and how it meets each of the elements of SMART, that it's specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time bound. If you have any questions when you're completing this, please let me know.